Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with West African style grilled beef. That's right, I'm going to show you my take on Suya. Although I'm not sure this version is authentic enough to actually call Suya. But what I do know is this is very fast, very easy, and extremely delicious. But before we get started, I have a little confession to make. This was really just an excuse to make and eat jollof rice. And at the end of the video, there will be an important announcement regarding that. But for now, let's go ahead and get started with our marinade, which begins with some all-natural, 100% just peanut butter. Although if your peanut butter does have some sugar in it, and maybe a couple other ingredients, it's probably still going to work here, but I think pure is better. And then to that we will add some tomato paste, which I'm definitely not carefully measuring in. And then we'll also need a little bit of oil, which in my case is going to be olive oil. And then we will spice this up with some smoked paprika, as well as a generous amount of cayenne, followed by one of the signature flavors, some ground allspice. And then we will also add some garlic powder, as well as some freshly ground black pepper, followed by a little bit of ground ginger. And then of course we're going to need some salt, and a good amount of it, since we're going to be marinating a couple pounds of meat. And then we'll finish up with everybody's favorite thing to do in a kitchen, which yes, is grating in some raw onion. Oh yeah, who's ready for a good cry? But the good news is we don't need a ton. So we'll go ahead and grab about half a small onion by the root end. And then we'll grate that until we get close to our fingertips. And then we'll stop. Okay, don't be a hero. And for a marinade, doing it this way is way better than dicing it or chopping it. Or just like crushing garlic is better for an aioli than chopping the garlic. And that's it. All we have to do is give this a good mix. And it's ready for our beef. Oh, and two things regarding the authenticity. All right, instead of peanut butter, I believe the original recipes use ground peanuts. But having said that, the peanut butter works really well. And then most of the recipes I looked at use more tomato paste than I did. But of course, that kind of thing's up to you. I mean, you are after all the Count Basie of how tomato pasty. But I didn't want to use too much because tomato paste can kind of overpower other things. And I really thought this had a beautiful balance. But either way, once that's mixed, we can go ahead and set it aside. And we can move on to cutting up a couple pounds of beef, which for me is going to be this beautiful hunk of top sirloin. And as usual, before we start cutting, we will look for any natural separation in the muscle. And if we have some, which I do, we will cut that first. And then we will start slicing this meat into about 1 to 1.5 inch cubes. And you know the drill. The exact size really doesn't matter as much as that you pick a size and stick with it. And while you could use a nicer, more expensive cut of beef for this, to me the relatively affordable top sirloin is a great choice. Okay, it has a beautifully beefy flavor. And cooked pink inside, which is what we're shooting for, it's going to be plenty tender enough. Okay, unlike some marinades, this is not going to tenderize our meat. So we probably want to avoid the tougher cuts like chuck. But anyway, no matter what we're using, we'll go ahead and cut that up as shown. And then we'll transfer it into our marinade, and we will toss it until it's thoroughly coated. And because I was brainwashed in culinary school to always use my hands anytime possible to mix things, I got in there with my fingers, and I got in there deep. And it only took a few seconds before I truly regretted my decision, since about a quarter of the marinade ended up on my hands. And with apologies to my culinary instructors back then, I think a spoon or a spatula would have done the job just as well. But anyway, the point is those pieces of beef need to be coated completely, at which point we'll cover this in plastic, and we will pop that in the fridge for just a couple hours. And I'm sure you could go longer, but this is a relatively quick marinade. But anyway, I put mine in the fridge for about 2 hours, 15 minutes before I pulled it out and began impaling this meat on skewers. And just a friendly reminder, when we do this, we definitely want the meat touching and pushed together ever so slightly, but we don't want to pack and smash that meat together too tightly, since that will decrease the amount of surface area. And as you know, when we cook something, especially on a grill, more surface area equals more flavor. And nobody wants less flavor. So I went ahead and skewered that up, and as you can see, I got 4. And that's it. We can go ahead and grab our tongs, and we can head outside, and we can place those down on some very hot white coals. And I believe I've mentioned this before, but if your coals are still on fire, don't put meat on top of them. That's right, your dad is doing it wrong. Okay, we always want to let that fire burn out, and for those coals to get mostly white before we place down our meat. And then once that's down, if you cut your meat about the same size I did, to get a nice medium, it's probably going to be about 5 to 6 minutes per side. And I know geometrically speaking, there are 4 sides, but you know what I mean. And as you know, anytime we're grilling, especially on charcoal, some spots might be a little hotter than others, so don't be afraid to change positions and move a skewer from the center to the outside. And because I'm something of a control freak and enjoy playing with my food, after giving these about 4 minutes per side, I have no problem turning them back over and moving them around as I see fit. And even though I enjoy my steak generally medium rare, the reason I recommend we cook these a little further here is so that outside surface has enough time to properly caramelize and partially char in spots, since that really does produce a lot of extra flavor. But anyway, you go ahead and cook these any way you want. And if you want to check with a thermometer, go ahead. But for me, when they firm up and spring back to the touch, they're usually pretty close. Okay, if they feel soft and mushy, it's too rare. And if they're hard and firm, that's probably overcooked. But I'm happy to report those felt just about perfect. So I went ahead and pulled those off. And as I did, I was very, very happy with the color, which is going to look even better when we head inside and transfer these onto a platter that may or may not have been scattered with sliced red onions, which would be a nice accompaniment to this, especially if we're going to eat these in flatbread. And then we don't need to do a sauce for these, although I think a little bit of fresh lime juice is super nice and helps cut through what is a fairly rich, fatty marinade. And of course, if we have any accumulated juices on the plate, we'll want to go ahead and spoon or brush those over. I mean, that is just common sense. I mean, what are you going to do, throw those away? And then as far as final touches go, I decided to do some freshly sliced green onions, as well as a nice scattering of freshly chopped cilantro. And then last but not least, I chopped up some peanuts and sprinkled those over the top. And I thought I had chopped them small enough, but there were a couple pieces that were too big. So I had to move that one in front so it wouldn't drive me crazy. And that's it. My probably not that authentic version of Suya was ready to enjoy. And I will be plating some up in a moment. But for now, let me just enjoy some right on the platter. And that, my friends, was every bit as amazing as it looked. Assuming you think this looks amazing. And I really hope you do. And for such a simple marinade, plus such a short marination time, this meat really was extremely flavorful, with a great balance between the richness of the peanut butter and that heat from the spices, with everything being elevated by the warm aromatic hug that is allspice. And as I already touched on, if there's anything that would benefit from a nice squeeze of fresh lime, it is exactly something like this. And if you're thinking that looks great, but shouldn't you be eating that with some jollof rice? Well, yes, I should, and I did. And just in case you're not familiar, jollof rice is a very spicy, intensely flavorful side dish from Nigeria/West Africa that I've gotten requests to make for like 10 years. And I'm very pleased to announce I'm finally going to show you my version, which is in fact going to be the next video. But anyway, let's go back to bragging about the beef, which was beyond beautiful in every way. Oh, and even though almost all the ingredients are different, what this may remind you of is a Thai-style beef satay, just in the way that smoky grilled beef plays off the peanut flavor. So if you enjoy that, you're going to love this. And along the same lines, if you're a fan of Mediterranean food and Middle Eastern food, as well as food from the Caribbean, that's also a really good indication that you're very much going to enjoy this. So for all those reasons and more, I really do hope you give this a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.